Condition Mirage is a build that was very notorious in the past for its high condition burst and its ability to evade very often, but ever since the one dodge nerf, it's lost a lot of its popularity. However, it still has a lot of ways to dodge, and it's a lot more powerful than people think it is. It still has all that condition burst, and there are some ways, which I'll show later on in the video, to conserve your dodges and to get the most out of them. And especially in World vs. World, you've got the energy sigil, you've got the endurance food, which are really good for giving you more dodges, which is the bread and butter of the Mirage builds, because the ambushes that are allowed after you dodge. So I'm going to go over the Condition Mirage build for World vs. World roaming. However, there is a version for PvP, which basically instead of dueling, you would take domination and you'd go carrion. This is mostly because there's no really good like amulet for toughness and condition damage other than Rabid in PvP, so they usually take domination and then you go carrion there. But for World vs. World, you're allowed Trailblazer and stuff like that, so you have a lot of condition duration, and you can also get precision, which is really good with the dueling trait line. So I take illusions, dueling, and Mirage. And in illusions, you get a lot of synergy with your shatters and clone generation. So Cry of Pain, which is your F2, your main damaging skill, which gives out confusion when you shatter your clones. It's going to give out more confusion per stack, and it's going to increase the duration. And then you've got the Pledge, which is going to increase your torch skills. So it gives extra burning when your torch skills land and reduces their recharge. This is actually really important because even though it looks like it's just like one burn stack, if that burn actually goes its entire duration, it adds up a lot of damage. So as you can see here, look, it's 12-second duration burning here, and yeah, it's going to add up to like 4,000 damage if you cover that Condi and it actually runs its course. And then you have Maim the Disillusioned, which makes all of your shatter skills give torment. It's not like amazing, but it's definitely important for the Condi Mirage playstyle because this is mostly where you get your torment, which is a unique condition, which is important. But when you do like your big shatter combos, you can sometimes get like 8-ish torment, which can add up over time. And then you have Master of Fragmentation, which makes your Mind Rack have a higher crit chance, not too important. Makes your Cry of Frustration cripple. So your Cry of Frustration is going to, well, because of the Blinding Dissipation trait, it's going to blind, it's going to cripple, and it's going to confuse. So it gives out 3 conditions there just with that, and then you've also got Maim the Disillusion, so it actually gives out 4 conditions as you can see here. So confusion, cripple, torment, blind. And it's also going to give a ton of confusion because of the Blinding Dissipation trait, which makes all of your blinds give confusion. So you can do like 20 confusion on your Cry of Frustration if you have the illusions and the Blinding Dissipation trait lines. So yeah, that can add up to a lot of damage, because if you attack with confusion on like 20 stacks, that can do like 4k, I think, damage. So yeah, it's really strong. Even though Mind Rack isn't like, you're not really a power build, but the torment can still be done by your Mind Rack. So if you got nothing else to shatter, you can sometimes use Mind Rack or just use it for the vigor uptime. Master of Fragmentation will also make your diversion strike up to 5 targets within range, which is good because diversion only hits 1 target and clones usually only shatter on the target that they were summoned on. There are going to be ways for you to change the targets with Mirage, but basically this is really good because if you're, say, like stomping a target, you're usually summoning the clones on the target that you downed, and then having diversion to basically interrupt the people that are rezzing is super important, or something like that. So it's just good in like these higher scaled up situations, and it's always nice to have extra CC. And then finally, it's going to make your distortion reflect projectiles, which can be nice for making plays, like if a ranger is going to point blank shot you and then you can knock them back. So dueling, you have a lot of critical strike synergy here, so this is why I kind of go for a Rabid in this build, and we'll talk about the armor a little bit. But whenever you crit, you will give yourself Vigor, which is super important because you want more dodges, and Vigor will also give you more condition damage because of Nomad's Endurance. So your vigor uptime is really important. You're going to get vigor from shattering, and you're going to get vigor from your crits every 10 seconds. So it's not like 100% uptime, but it's good enough. And you're going to get condition damage and endurance regeneration from that, which is nice. It's all that you need. And then whenever you use a pistol attack, it will bleed, which is really important for the pistol 4 because that can hit a lot of times. So you can add up quite a bit of bleeding from that. And it will also make your pistol skills recharge 25% every 3 seconds that you interrupt someone. So this build has a lot of interrupts with the dazes on F3, the sword ambush, and we'll talk about the Mirage stuff later, and then obviously on magic bullet. So you can get a lot of your pistol attacks out, and they're pretty high impact because this does a lot of damage, and then magic bullet is a stun, so helps you to lock down targets. And then you have sharper images, which gives your illusions bleeding whenever they crit, so having a little bit of precision can sort of give you more bleeding application, which is always nice. And then we already talked about blinding dissipation, and you have master fencer, which is going to give you fury, which is going to give you more basically chance to crit, which gives you more synergy with the dueling trait line. And then finally you have ineptitude, which whenever you interrupt a foe, you will inflict blind, and then blind gives confusion. So a lot of the blind that you're going to give out on this build is going to come from your F2, but you can also interrupt quite a bit, and when you interrupt someone, you've set them far back on their rotation, but they're also blind. So you're setting them back, and then the next thing that they use is also blinded. So it's such a disruptive combination of, you know, traits with build here. So ineptitude is a very strong trait for sure. Finally, you have Mirage. So Mirage is going to give you access to regeneration. So normally you don't really have a lot of sustain on Mesmer builds. I would say that Mirage is probably the highest sustain build, just baseline. Obviously you could take Inspiration and Chaos, but those trait lines, I mean, Inspiration is definitely good, but Chaos is really not that good, and I don't really think it'd be worth it to run Inspiration Condi Mirage. And yeah, as I said, Chaos isn't really worth it on this build. So this is really like the only way that you can get sustain on this build is renewing Oasis, which gives you basically a 400 heal every time you dodge in 3 seconds of regeneration, which I mean it's pretty okay because you're dodging quite a bit. So you have not 100% uptime on regen, but a lot. And it's kind of like your only other way to gain healing other than your heal skill. So it's really important for your sustain. We already talked about Nomad's Endurance. It's going to be really good to give you extra Condi damage when you have Vigor. And another thing is, like, when you're just kiting around, you can just use your shatter skills, even if you don't plan to like use them with like clones and damage, because you'll get the Vigor from them if you just use it, and that'll give you extra dodges, right? And that can be nice for helping you to avoid damage. So something important to remember. Then you have Desert Distortion. Illusions shattered by distortion become Mirage mirrors, and ambush skills become available for a short time whenever you grant distortion to yourself. So you've only got one distortion on this build, but the fact that you get Mirage mirrors, which are basically like these little crystals on the floor, they look like this, and whenever you create a Mirage mirror, it will weaken nearby enemies for 5 seconds whenever you pick it up, and it will also give you a Mirage cloak, which is basically a dodge. So whenever you shatter with distortion, however many clones you create, you give yourself that many Mirage mirrors. So you can dodge quite a bit with the distortion, and because you can dodge a lot, you can also use your ambush skills. So we'll talk about those later. So distortion is very important, and because this is a shatter oriented build, Signet of Illusions gives you 2 distortions. So it's a lot of dodging, and then you can reset it and do a lot more dodging again. And then finally, you're going to have Elusive Mind, which gives you 2 condition cleanse whenever you dodge. Now, this isn't whenever you gain Mirage Cloak, because that would be just busted, but it's whenever you actually use your dodge bar endurance to gain Mirage Cloak. So you're going to gain a lot of condition cleanse over time, but that is your only condition cleanse on this build, really, besides the Jaunt and the Prestige, but those are like single Condi cleanses every once in a while. So you do need to remember that your Condi cleanse is on your dodge, and while you can dodge skills that would give you Condis, sometimes you can just react to getting Condis on you and then dodge those. And of course, dodging will give you regeneration, which will lower the duration of conditions on you, so that's kind of nice. The equipment that I take is a mix of Trailblazer and Rabid gear. Basically, you want to go as much Rabid until you get to like 20-ish crit chance, and then you want to go the rest into Trailblazer. The reason for this is because your crit chance is important to the dueling traits, right? Because you want to get the vigor whenever you crit, and when you have Fury, you will have like 40-ish% crit chance. So that's kind of important for your vigor uptime. And your clones will get your precision. Now they won't be critting very often, but as you know, because of the sharper images, they can give bleeding a little bit. It's not too important though. So I take mostly Trailblazers for the condition duration. I get 40% condition duration with the Rune of the Traveler as well. So this gives you a lot of condition duration from just the pure stats. And what's really important is the movement speed, because Mirage, unlike Chrono, does not have a passive movement speed modifier, and that's so important to any kind of like roaming build, is to have movement speed. And there's really no other way to get it, because you'd have to go, I mean, it's Mesmer, so you can really only get it from Sign of Inspiration, the swiftness, right? So you kind of have to use a rune that gives you movement speed. On my sword and the torch, I have energy and absorption. So the sword is where most of your interrupts are going to be, and whenever you interrupt a foe, you're going to do all that stuff, right, where you recharge your pistol skills. You are going to be giving out blind and confusion. Now obviously it's kind of weird, right? You're going to be doing most of your interrupts on the sword, but it's recharging your pistol skills. So generally what you want to do is do your pistol burst, and then leave pistol, and then do some interrupts, and then as soon as you go back into pistol, you'll be getting those off cooldown. Absorption is really good because it steals 3 boons when you interrupt a foe on a 3-second ICD, and boons are the lifeblood of Guild Wars 2. So energy is obvious. You have the unnerfed energy sigils in World vs. World, which give you an entire dodge bar basically. And then on your axe and your pistol, I take Doom and Energy, because usually how the build works is you do Sword Torch, and then you swap into your axe and pistol. And you obviously want Energy on both your sets. But I put Doom on the axe because that's usually where the combo is going to start to ramp up and start doing really good burst damage. So it adds more poison, and that gives damage and reduces healing. So those are the sigils and runes. And the food that you take is obviously going to be the bowl of Orrian truffle and meat stew, which is going to give you might whenever you dodge, and it's going to give you 40% endurance regeneration. And that does stack with vigor, but it's not multiplicatively. But you still want both, because you want as much dodge as you can get. As for the utility skills, the Mirage Heal False Oasis is definitely the best because it gives you vigor, and it's going to give you the highest amount of healing per second, which is just really nice, and it's going to give you an extra Mirage Mirror, which is going to give you more dodges itself. So it's just the best heal. If you're ever a Mirage and you're not Inspiration, you should pretty much be using this. And then I like the Signet of Illusions, obviously, because it's a Shatter build. And Blink is pretty much mandatory on any kind of like roaming Mesmer build. I have Jaunt as well because it's extra Condi cleanse. It's good for enabling burst for your combos and stuff like that, and it's just good for escaping. It's just all around good. And then Illusionary Ambush, which is kind of like your wild card here. A lot of people like the mantra of distraction, which gives you a daze on your target. But it's so single target and only is useful in attacking a target, whereas Illusionary Ambush can give you a dodge which you can use with your sword, and that'll allow you to use your Mirage Leap, which is a daze on the attack. So that can equal into a daze, like the Mantra of Distraction. Obviously it's less instant, but there's a lot more versatility to it because the Illusionary Ambush, first of all, gives you a dodge, so it's like you have 2 dodges already. I mean, you have the Energy Sigils, which is already like a second dodge, and then this is like your 3rd dodge, really. And it's also really weird because Illusionary Ambush ports you randomly around your target. So if you're at maximum range to the target, it could put you at maximum range on the other side of the target, and you can use this for juking, chasing. It's just really good. Sometimes the RNG can be bad, but a lot of cases it's kind of fun interacting with that RNG, and it's one of my favorite skills, to be honest, on Mirage. And it will also put all of your clones around the target that you choose, and they will do their ambush skill on that target. So it's really good for doing burst damage because your clones will be on that target, and then you can just instantly shatter those clones after they do their ambushes. So Illusionary Ambush, I think, is really good for the defensive and offensive capabilities of Mirage. And when you're roaming, you've got to deal with all these different kind of situations where, you know, Mantra might not be useful in that situation, but Illusionary Ambush is almost always useful, unless you get really terrible RNG. The idea of Mirage is that your one skill becomes an ambush skill for a few seconds after you dodge. So in Sword, you'll get a different ambush ability, and in Axe, you'll get a different ambush ability. So while you have Sword, if I dodge here, and I get a leap skill as my one skill shortly after, and that can give you a daze, and it will also leave behind a clone if you are targeting a enemy. So as you can see here, it creates a clone. So every time I use my dodge into the ambush, I'm giving myself a clone. I'm potentially interrupting the target, which can steal boons because I have Absorption on my sword, and also blind and confusion if I interrupt them. So yeah, you want to be using your ambush in your sword most of the time. You do want to pop into your axe though, and sometimes you're going to dodge anyways and you've got nothing better to do, so you can use the axe ambush, which is just a little bit of like a, it sends out 2 axes that do torment. It's not amazing, but it can home in. It's kind of easy to land and you don't really need to invest anything really. So because you have energy sigils, what you'll often do is you'll dodge and then weapon swap, and then you'll have another dodge and then you can dodge again. So you can like double dodge very often. And because you don't want to be using your ambush in axe very often, what I like to do is I will wait until my dodge bar is full and my weapon swap is off cooldown. If your weapon swap is almost coming off cooldown when you're about to leave axe, I wait to dodge, and then what I do is I dodge, weapon swap, and then that puts my endurance full, and then I can use the ambush skill of the sword, and then I can also use another dodge and another ambush of the sword. So it's like a double sword ambush, which just gives you so much mobility and just energy generation, as we talked about, the clone generation. And it's just a really good way to think about your rotation, because if I do this instead, say like I do dodge and then sword and I swap into axe and then I immediately use the axe ambush, it's like, well, that's kind of low impact. So generally what I like to do is I just use my dodge while in axe to just cover my other skills. Like say I'll use my heal skill while I am in the axe. Well, I'll just cover my heal skill with my dodge because my dodge has no animation. And then I don't really need to use the axe ambush. You also get, you know, False Oasis is going to give you a mirror, so you can use that as well. But obviously, it's a lot more value to do a double sword ambush. So it's pretty much how I like to think of the energy sigil rotation, is you want to dodge, swap weapon, use the ambush, dodge, and then use another ambush. As for the skills, your Phantasmal Mage is a very high duration burn on the target. You want to be using that in melee range because it gives the burn in melee range. So what I like to do is I'll jaunt on the target in the middle of the cast of the Phantasmal Mage so that it can land that really long duration burn. And if you cover those burns, you can see it's ticking for 700. That's pretty high damage for pretty low investment. And then from there, what I like to do is so Phantasmal Mage gives you a clone because it's a phantasm. Then what I'll do is I'll sword 3 and immobilize the target and then dodge and use my ambush in sword, which will immobilize plus daze them. So that's 3 clones there because I use the ambush, which creates a clone. I use sword 3 and I use torch 5. And from there I can use Cry of Frustration while they're immobilized and give them 16 confusion. So that's kind of like the base combo that you want to do, and I'll show you again. It's torch 5 into jaunt, sword 3, dodge, ambush into F2, and you can see the condies are pretty heavy on that one. And that's going to be a pretty reliable opener, but obviously if you're going against players who know how to save their cooldowns and use them correctly, you want to be baiting them out. So oftentimes you can use your Mind Rack or even your Diversion as your opening shatter and bait out their cooldowns maybe, and then you can go in for a secondary burst. So say I start out with Diversion instead. So from there I have only Torch 4 and Sword 2 up. So Sword 2 is used defensively, you can just use that whenever you need a dodge. But you can use Torch 4, which will blind in melee range, which will give confusion. And then after 3 seconds, that will give 2 burning that are really long duration in melee range again. So you want to be using that in melee range as well. So that's why sword works out well with torch, because they're both kind of like melee damaging. So when I use the prestige, I like to go into melee range, and you can swap to axe at that point, or you can use your sword ambush to get in range with the prestige. But you can use your axes of symmetry, which will move all of your clones to the target that you use it on, and you'll give confusion to them. And why this is really good is because it puts all of your clones on a different target and it puts them in melee range for your burst. So your secondary burst can be Torch 4, you're in stealth, then you wait like 3 seconds and you precast the Axis of Symmetry into it, and then you use your F2 into that, and that is a lot of confusion as well. From there, in melee range, you can use your Axe 2 is generally what you like to do after your burst, because it just gives cripple and a little bit more torment, and it's kind of a hard to land skill unless you're right in melee range. So I like to use it right after I do my burst. And then you have your pistol. So the pistol 4 is pretty heavy bleeding damage, and then your pistol 5 is a stun. So you can use this as your like third burst, right? So you magic bullet, and then from there you can use your Axe 3, Axe 2, and then your F2. Yeah, there's a lot of ways for you to do a combo, and a lot of ways for you to generate clones. You've also got clone generation from your pistol, obviously, and Lingering Thoughts is going to generate a clone if you are in melee range of the target when you use it. It'll create this little like mirror over there, and it will summon a clone if it is in range of an enemy. So if I use it out of range of an enemy, that mirror won't summon anything. So you got to be near people when you use your Axe 2 to get the clone generation. So how do you survive on Mirage? Well, you have the stealth on the prestige. You have sword 3, which if you use that, you can reposition if you use it again within a couple seconds. And you'll swap places with the clone, which will allow you to do some jukes. You also have on your axe, your 3 skill is a D target, which is really good because when you have a bunch of clones, it's kind of hard for people to retarget you when you've got all these clones up. So it's really good to use Axe 3 when you have clones. Same thing with Illusionary Ambush, because that'll also detarget, so both of these skills are kind of similar. And you also have your Desert Distortion. So whenever you distort, you will give... all of your clones will turn into basically Mirage mirrors, and those mirrors can be used to ambush and also to evade. So you have a lot of like generation of shatters through the distortion, so it's one of your most powerful shatters for sure. And you can also recharge your distortion with Signet Illusions because it recharges all of your shatter skills. And how I like to use Signet of Illusions is I like to just use all of my shatters aggressively when my Signet of Illusions is off cooldown. So I know that I'll always get value from my Signet of Illusions because I'll never be using Signet of Illusions with all of my shatters up, because you usually want to use Signet of Illusions when your distortion is being used, because you don't want to get interrupted on your Signet of Illusions, and you also want to recharge your distortion right after you use your last one so that you can get pretty much safety and value out of that. So I like to just use my shatters aggressively and front load them a little bit, but once your Signet of Illusions is on cooldown, you want to play more passively and more conservative with your shatters so that you don't run out of everything. Alright, let's show some gameplay. So the Mirage is very weak to Thieves because Thieves have instant bursts that they can time in between your dodges, and they can basically poke you down, and since Mirages don't have that much sustain, and Thieves, when they steal to Mirages, or Mesmers in general, get the Ectoplasm, which gives them a lot of sustain. So usually Thieves beat Mesmers in long sustained fights. So when you are playing against a Thief, you have to play aggressively. And as you can see right there, I actually did a really good play where I basically pretended like I was going to run away from the Thief, and then I immediately turned my back so that when they backstab me, they would front stab me instead. So that basically baited them to come out of stealth and allowed me to counter pressure them. But now I'm being attacked by some rangers, so I'm trying to counter pressure while also kiting. But yeah, it's going to be difficult to fight my hard counter while also getting pew-pewed on. So I keep kiting. I'm mostly a melee build, so I have to use line of sight a lot more when I'm going against ranged classes. So I jump on the Thief, and I have a really good pistol burst here, which allows me to get the down on the Thief. But because more rangers show up, and even a Dragon Hunter, I go into the down state and I am dead. But that's kind of like one of the hardest matchups for the Mirage. So learning how to handle that, and because obviously Thieves are the apex predators of World vs. World, you got to know how to handle them. These next clips are going to show a little bit more quicker fights against, some newer players. I would say that Condi Mirage is really good at killing noobs because they don't understand how to play around the clones. And you'll see here this Guardian is actually attacking my clones in this fight. He actually judges interventions to a clone, so it's actually kind of funny. But yeah, and they also don't really know how to handle confusion well. Like how you handle confusion is you actually don't use your skills, but then when they panic they start using skills. So yeah, it can be really hard for some people to handle it. So here's going to be another situation where I'm going to jump on a ranger. Now rangers are usually pretty tanky, but actually a lot of World vs. World rangers just run full glass, and it makes them free kills pretty much. So this ranger here, I'm just jumping on them, and it's really hard for them to handle the Mesmer on top of them because their longbow is their main source of damage, and they don't know which one is which. I'm hiding behind clones, and they can, like line of sight the point blank shot and eat it for me. So it's a really good matchup in my opinion if you can get up close to the ranger. And this one is a Scourge. Now Scourge has a lot of conditions and it's sort of tanky, and the main benefit that Mesmers have against Necros is that they have a lot of interrupts. But Scourges are hard to interrupt because most of their stuff has no animation, or you can't really tell what the animation is. So it's hard for you to interrupt them. So I get them pretty low, and they're still able to kind of resustain there with barrier. And I have my clones up, but I don't really want to get close to them until their barrier is down and they've got all this like AoE on the ground that I don't want to stand in. So I am playing very in and out with my playstyle, and I do realize that they're pretty much out of everything here, so I go in, but I still have to be careful because I could get instantly killed if I get too many Condis on me, because I've only got 2 Condi cleanse per dodge. So yeah, I get the kill, this is going to be a 1v1 with a very tanky elementalist. They're running the water trait line, which gives them a lot of condition cleanse, and that means that they're going to pretty much counter my build because my build relies mostly on condition burst. I don't have the heavy throughput to just go through a lot of their sustain. So that's kind of like the main issue with this build, is builds that are too tanky for you to kill, you'll feel kind of useless, like you can never kill them. But that doesn't mean that it's just a hard losing matchup all the time. Actually, in a lot of cases, it's because you need to save your cooldowns. And that's what I'm going to be talking about a little bit, is which skills you want to use to bait out cooldowns and which ones you want to use to get the kill on. So I do realize in this 1v1 that my win condition is to interrupt their heal skill because they're using the cantrip that gives them like a lot of Condi cleanse. So I realize that the win condition is 100% landing my burst, and then once the burst is landed I need to interrupt their heal skill. So I interrupt it there, which is really good, but I'm out of all of my bursts, so I have to like burst them, then interrupt, and then follow through with burst. So I kind of need to bait out their cooldowns without using all of my burst. So what's the most efficient way to bait out cooldowns without using your own? Well, the Pistol 4 is a very good skill for that because it's such a renewable skill, because you can renew it by using interrupts, right, to reduce the recharge of it. So Pistol 4 is really good for just throwing it out. Also, Pistol 4 is, it's kind of like a long duration, so even if they dodge it, it's still probably going to get you some value, and it's going to give you a little bit of pressure while also baiting out some cooldowns. And if they don't dodge it, well then it's going to give you a lot of pressure. So Pistol 4 is probably one of the best abilities to just use without timing it too well. Obviously you want to position it, but the timing isn't insanely important. So Pistol 4 is a very good skill to use to bait out cooldowns. Mirage Ambush on Sword is also a really good skill to use, because not only is it going to give you your pistol back because of the interrupt, but if it interrupts them, then it will give them blind and confusion, and a lot of times people will panic when they get blind and confusion and interrupted like that, and they'll use cooldowns. So yeah, that's a really good skill to use. Your Axe 2 is also pretty good to use because it's a renewable resource, because it's got 2 count recharge and it's pretty low cooldown. So Axe 2 is pretty good, Pistol 4 is pretty good, and your Mirage Ambush on Sword is very good for baiting out cooldowns. But then when you want to shatter and do your burst, that's when you want to do your F2, and you want to do your Pistol 5 so that they stand in your bursts. And yeah, from there pretty much you want to follow through and interrupt key abilities. Now also another thing that I'm doing is being very aggressive with my torch skills. So when they port away from me and I'm about to use my Torch 5, I port into melee range as I'm casting the Torch 5 so that I actually hit them with the Torch 5 and give them the burning. And then I try to cover the burning with my other skills so that that lasts, and kind of, it gives you like this long sustained DPS if you can get your burning to stick on the torch. And obviously using the Torch 4 and then landing the 3 seconds later burst skill from it is also going to give you some more burning. So yeah, those are pretty much how you're going to be playing as Mirage. You bait out cooldowns, you wait for the right moment, and then you shatter. And then you pretty much follow through with interrupts, and just kind of just follow through with all the renewable damage resources like your Axe and your Pistol. And that's pretty much it. Now this 1v1 actually doesn't end because it's interrupted at the end, but it's still a very good 1v1 and shows pretty much how to play to your strengths. So if you like this video, then give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.